Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 2 that explain about the kind of poem, dramatic, narrative, and lyric. The group members are Alfia Nanda, Aditya Prasasti, Rafie Eka Wildan, Hanndria, Hidayatun Nafiah, and Anas Abdullah. The first topic is dramatic, well explained by Hanndria.
Dramatic has elements that closely related to drama, either because it is written in some kind of dramatic form or uses as a dramatic technique, may also suggest a story, but there more emphasis on character rather than on the narrative. Dramatic monologue means self-conversation, speech or talk which includes interlocutor present dramatically. It means a person who is speaking to himself or someone else speak to reveal specific intention of his action. However, in literature, it is a poetic form or a poem that presents the speech or conversation of a person in a dramatic manner. Dramatic monologue usually combination of drama and poetry, present the speech of a single character in specific situation at a critical moment. The speaker addresses one or more persons who are present and who are listening to speaker but remain silent.
Soliloquy, a passage spoken by a speaker in a poem or character in a play. No one present to hear the speaker. The talk expressed, the emotion displayed, and the revelation made freely and without inhibition give deep insight into the character. Used in poetic dramas to enrich and vivify characterization. Example: helmet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether this nobler in the mind to suffer the sling and arrows of outrangers' fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing and them. To die, to sleep, perchance, to dream. Hey! There's the rub, for in that sleep or that, what dreams may come when we have suffered of this mortal toil must give us pause. There is the respect that makes calamity of so long life, for who would bear the whims and scorn of time? The oppressed wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of desperate love, the lost delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that passion merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quits make with a bare bargain. Who would fardels bear to grind and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of?
Okay, I'll continue the third example of dramatic poetry. The third example is character sketch. What is character sketch? A poem in which the writer is concerned less with matters of story, complete or implied, then he is with arousing sympathy, antagonism, or merely interest for an individual. Second, both serve as observer or commentator. Third, incorporates elements of suspense, conflict, or tension. So we can see the one of example from character sketch. This is a Star Story by Abu bin Adam and James Henry. Abu bin Adam made his tribe in Greece, woke one night from a deep dream of peace, and saw within the moonlight in his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom. An angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Ben Adam bold, and to the presence in the room he said, "What write you?" The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abou. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abou spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee, then write me as one who loves his fellow man." Thus, we can conclude Abou incorporates the element of suspense, because he worries not to be one of who loved by the Lord.
Now, I will explain about narrative poem. A narrative poem is a type of poem that tells a story. It is often making faces of the narrators and characters as well. Narrative poems feature an entire story told by the narrator from the beginning to the end. The entire story is usually written in method verse. Narrative poem contains all of the elements, including characters, plot, conflict, and resolution. Sometimes, narrative poems do not have to follow rhyme pattern, but most of it retain a formal rhyme scheme such as A, B, C, D, with the second and fourth lines rhyming. Normally, it is dramatic, with objectives, diverse, and matter. There are four kinds of narrative poem. First is ballad. Ballad is a poem similar to a folk tale which uses a repeated refrain. This means that every few stanzas, a portion of the poem is repeated, much like a song. The second is epic. Epic is a long, serious poem which tells the story of a hero. Think of stories like Odyssey or Ben-Hur. Third is idyll. Idyll is a poem about either an idylized country scene or about the heroes of yesteryear. This could also include the story of Odyssey. Except for different reasons. An idyll speaks of someone or something in a way that it should be idolized. For example, today many stories of Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. could be written about in an idyll. However, an even better example could be George Washington. And the last is lay. Lay is a long poem which was sung by medieval minstrel. The long poems generally were about the news of the day or historical facts they wished to be passed along throughout the countryside. And now, look at this poem example. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I think one could certainly make the case that The Raven is a ballad. A ballad must tell a story which this poem certainly does. And it tells a story about a man sits in his room one night, reading in the hope of distracting himself from his grief over the death of his beloved Lenore. He seems to be consumed with grief over her death. A strange raven enters his room via the window, and he proceeds to ponder this strange bird and imagine all kinds of fantastic scenarios to account for its appearance and speech. Ultimately, he thinks of it as a find that will never leave him, always reminding him of death and loss. And the poem is very musical because it contains a number of sound devices. For example, there is a lot of internal rhyme. Look at the first line. 1:07 and midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary. Dreary and weary, it has same rhyme.
Okay, so I will explain to you the last kind of poem. It is lyric poem. So a lyric poem or a lyrical poem in the literature is a poem in which the poet either expresses his feelings and emotions. So the poet is expressing the feelings of the writer. The poet also presents a character in the first person to express his emotions. It is a combination of lyrical poetry, where a piece of poetry is written as a lyric. A lyric poem is usually written in the first person. Some of the best examples of lyric poetry come from Italian and English sonnets. So here is the example of the lyric poem written by Edgar Allan Poe. I will read some lines from this poem. Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and beloved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with love that the winged cherubs of heaven coveted her and me. According to the Wikipedia, Annabel Lee is the last poem composed by Poe, and it was published on January 1850 in Philadelphia. The narrator or Poe really expresses his feeling in these poems, and he fell in love with Annabel Lee since they were very young. Until the death of Annabel Lee, the author still loves her. Okay, that's all that I can deliver to you about lyric poem. Thank you so much.